Hello, this is video training. Sales and Inventory, Level 3, Chapter 3, Pricing Formulas. Okay, let's talk about pricing formulas. I'll be going into the Inventory, Sales and Inventory Control. It's the main menu for inventory. Pricing formulas are right here. Now, what's a pricing formula used for? Pricing formula is not used for giving discounts. It's not typically used to discount pots. It's typically used, if not for anything, it's used for increasing your retail. In other words, suppose the manufacturer one of your manufacturers, maybe they're not giving you enough markup. Maybe they don't give you a retail price. Maybe they just give you a cost and you sell it for what you want to sell it for. So you want to create your own formula on how you want your list price calculated. Or for an example, maybe they are the only Yamaha dealer for 100 miles. So you know what? You want to increase your profit margin. You're going to increase it up just a little bit. You can just increase it 5% and adds a lot to the bottom line. So pricing formulas are normally used when you want the computer to calculate what you want for your suggested retail price. If you're discounting, typically that's done by customer, so you can set it so that your customers will get 10% off, 5%. You can set it up so that when anybody walks in the door, they get 10% off the manufacturer's list. That's the preferred way of discounting because you want the customer to see that, hey, the list price was $1 and I gave it to you for 70 cents. You don't want to just change your list price so that they don't realize they got value. So let's go into pricing formula maintenance. And we'll go over some of the examples we ship with the system. I'm going to hit next. This is what you're going to see in your system, and this is what our default pricing formula is. It basically is exactly what we have here. Use list price, do not alter. So your system is shipped so that any list price that comes from the manufacturer file is exactly what is going to be in as your list selling price. What it's telling me here is that I want to take everything, just multiply it times 1, which means I'm not going to do anything. The only thing it's going to do, it's going to mock up anything where the minimum selling price is less than 25 cents. It's going to make it 25 cents. So I'm going to hit next. Let's go to the next one where I can kind of explain how this works. This is what we call a standard cost multiplier. This is a very popular formula here, actually. And let me just show you kind of what it's asking you. For example, you have a high range, you have a list multiplier and a cost multiplier. Well, the high range is going to look, for example, I have 50 cents, which this means that any pot which is 50 cents or less, I am going to multiply the list price, the manufacturer's suggested list price, times 1, and I'm going to multiply my cost times 3. And I am going to make my list price the larger of the two. Now the first question is, okay, anything that's less than 50 cents, but what? List less than 50 cents or cost less than 50 cents? Well, that's based on what you select here, your high range. Do you want it to look at my cost, anything that costs me 50 cents or less? Or are you looking at the manufacturer's suggested list? Typically, you're probably safer looking at cost. If you're working off a cost multiplier, which is kind of what I am, I definitely want to work off cost. So I'm telling it, compare to my cost. Take an example where my cost was 50 cents and the manufacturer's suggested list was $1. It would do exactly as it looks. It's going to multiply 1 times the manufacturer's list, which would be $1. It's going to multiply my cost, which is 50 cents, times 3, which is going to be $1.50. It's going to use $1.50 as my new list price. That's going to be it's going to take the larger of the two. When a pot is 51 cents to 99, it is going to multiply the list times 1, the cost times 2.75. So as you can see, as the pot gets more expensive, I'm actually lowering my markup. So inexpensive pots are getting marked up quite a bit. As they get more and more expensive, they get marked up less and less and less. Now look at what it's doing down here. It's basically saying any pot from 100 to 200, I'm going to multiply 1.75 and multiply the list and take whichever is larger. Typically, it's going to use the cost multiplier. But notice what it's doing here. Any pot where my cost is over $200, which probably relates to $400 on the list side. I'm going to multiply the manufacturer's list times 0.9 and my cost times 1.3. What this does is it basically makes it where when people call around, people don't price shop. They're not going to make phone calls when they're buying a spark plug. They typically don't care if they're paying 10 cents more for a spark plug. It's not a big deal. The fact that you have it, that's a bigger deal. But they are going to call around on a $500 pot. They are going to call around on a $1,000 pot. They're going to make the phone call. They're going to call you and 2 other dealers, 3 other dealers. Well, what this means is that whenever anybody makes those phone calls on the expensive pots, you're probably going to be quoting 10% less than everybody else. So you get that reputation in your area of being the least expensive dealer, even though you're making it up on the inexpensive pots. So this is something that is kind of popular. People like to do that and maybe you don't want yours at 200, maybe you want yours at 500. Where you can afford to give up a little bit on your profit margin. You know you're making 30%, so you're not giving it away. You're making a little bit less profit, but you know your handling cost is a lot less for an expensive pot than it is for inexpensive pots. So there again, this is something that you can create all different types of formulas. Each formula has a number. You can apply that number to a range of product codes. You can apply that number typically to a manufacturer or vendor, where you can say all Yamaha pots I want to use this, all Mercury pots I want to use that, all Honda pots I want to use number 6. So you can have as many formulas as you want, and they're all going to ask you a series of questions. What do you want me to compare to? List? Or do you want me to compare to cost? How do you want me to round? Nearest nickel, round to the nearest penny, which is pretty much no rounding, round up all the time. What do you want my minimum selling price to be? It's probably not worth going back there and getting it if you can't get at least 50 cents. Let's look at some more out here. There's one where it's basically saying, look, I'm gonna increase my profit margin for whatever manufacturer I want to use for Formula 3. Any pot that's $250 or less, I'm adding 25% to my list. I don't care about the cost. I'm adding 20%. I'm adding 15%, 10, 5. Anything that's over $75, I'm selling it at manufacturer's list. Sometimes it's safe to put a little costing in there, so you know that, hey, there may be some pots out there where the manufacturer is not even giving you 20% markup. So sometimes it might be a good idea to put something in here like 1.20, so you at least I know that I'm never going to be making less than 20% if I put 1.20 in there, because it'll multiply this and take whatever's larger. This is one where I'm just adding 15% to everything. And this is one where I'm adding 20%, 10%. If you want to create a new one, you make up a number. I'm going to hit the tab key or the enter key. You put what you want to compare to. I typically are comparing to cost. Cost is a better known quantity. You can count on that. That's what you pay for it. List is something you never quite know what it's going to be. The manufacturer may say they average a 50% markup, but you know what? That may be true, but some pots might be 70 and some pots might be 15. So, cost is probably a little bit safer. Do you want to round up all the time? Do you want to round it all? Do you want to do no rounding? Do you want a minimum selling price? Maybe 40 cents is the less I want to sell it for. And what do you want your ranges to be? And there again, maybe I want to say, look at anything that's up to $5. Maybe I want to just add 10% to my list price, but I want to make sure I'm going to add 1.5 just to be safe. Now, what you want to do is hit the tab key here or the down arrow key, and maybe from 5 to 10 I want to do 1.5. And maybe this here is going to be 1.5. Maybe here I want to do anything from right to here. Maybe I'm going to do it list price, but I want to make sure that I make at least 30%. So what this is, if the manufacturer has any pots out there where I'm not going to make my 30%, it's going to mark it up. I want to say add new, and now I created a new formula. So you can create as many formulas as you want. We also have an option when you're creating formulas, and as we went over in Chapter 1, price code. There are price codes like ZZ, which means when I do a manufacturer update, and this is a manufacturer update, when you update from your manufacturer file, do you want certain things changed or not? If I'm using pricing formula, This here means don't update anything in my inventory file. I don't want my prices changed. This means don't update the cost. This means don't update the description. Okay. Now we've created pricing formulas. How do we actually go in and tell the computer that I want to use that pricing formula for a certain manufacturer? Well, before I do that, let's go look up a pot. And I'm going to go into inventory maintenance here. And I'm just going to type in a pot number here. And let's take a look at this pot. It's just a Yamaha pot. And I'm going to click right here, year-to-date stats. Now you can see that what this is the manufacturer's suggested retail. Yamaha says I should sell this pot for $920. That's what they sell it for. They're also telling me that the dealer list is $920, which means I'm not marking it up, which I wasn't. I'm using list price based on whatever my pricing catalog says at the time. So let's go in now, and I'm going to go into vendor maintenance and reports. And the first thing I want to do is go in and look up the Yamaha vendor and tell it that I don't want it to use pricing formula 1. That's what it's set for right now. When we ship you the system, all of them are going to get set to 1. That means don't change it unless the customer wants to change it. So if you want to change it, you would click here. It goes to the formula that I'm using. I would then go and say, you know what, let's use this one here. So I'm going to hit escape. And now that's formula 2 that I wanted to use. So we're going to hit change. I just changed that. Now by doing that, it didn't go out to my catalog file and change every single Yamaha pot that I have, because there are 230,000 Yamaha pot numbers in my catalog file. It didn't go out to my inventory and change all those pots. Now if I load a new manufacturer file, it will do all those things. So the best time to do this is right before you load a manufacturer file. But if in fact you want to change it and just kind of look at it and see what it's going to do, and maybe you don't like that formula, maybe you want to change it 2 or 3 times, well, you can change it and say, okay, now go do it. I'm going to go into update price file. Now there's a button here called recalculate manufacturer prices. Now like I said before, if you're loading a new one, it's all done automatically. You just put the CD in, you load it, it's going to go through all these steps all in one step. It's going to do everything automatically. If you're doing it kind of manually, which is we're doing, we're saying, you know what, I don't know what formula I want to use. I want to play with a couple. I want to look at it and see what it did. Well, let's just recalculate manufacturer prices. And let's just hit OK. And it says, okay, what vendor do I want to do? Yamaha. Okay. And I want to do all Yamaha pots. I could say just pots that begin with 5 or 6. This is the formula that I want to use. Yes, it is. Okay, which is a lot different from list price. Do I want to select a different formula? Nope. And now it's processing my whole Yamaha catalog. Remember we talked about the file cabinets? It's going through that Yamaha file cabinet, and like I said, there's about 230,000 numbers out there, and it's changing the prices on every single one. So regardless of what Yamaha pot I type, it's going to have my new list price on it. It just did 225,000 numbers. I'm going to select OK. So that did my catalog file. Like we said before, we have 2 file cabinets. It does it all automatically, both of them at the same time when you load a new manufacturer file, but we're not doing it automatically. So we're going to do this one here, recalculate in-stock manufacturer prices. And when I do that, it asks me a couple of questions. It's saying, okay, obviously went in and we changed the whole catalog. There's no questions there. We know what you need to do. You always want your newest prices. That's what you want. But what about things you have in inventory? You may or may not want to have everything updated. For example, what if the price goes down? Do you want to have the retail price automatically go down? Or would you rather just see a report of ones that were down and you manually make the decision? If I bought something for $10 and they told me the retail was $20, and now all of a sudden they reduced their price where they say the retail is not $20 anymore, but it's $15, do I want that to really go down to $15, or do I want to keep it at $20? That's what that's asking. If you don't want it to do it, then say no. Do I want to update the product code? What that means is when you're adding inventory and when you're into inventory maintenance or ordering inventory, there's a field called product code. Most manufacturers supply us with a product code, so there may be something in there. Some dealers like to put their own product codes in. They make their own product codes for their own pots, so they can categorize their pots and then get reports on, okay, here's what I sold this month with this product, and there's lots of reports that report by product code. So if you're using your own product code and you're not using the manufacturer's, you probably don't want the system to update it if it changes. So you don't want, if I went into Yamaha and I put my own product codes in there for stuff I have in inventory, I don't want it to get automatically wiped out or changed to what Yamaha wants it to be. I'm not using Yamaha price codes, I'm using my own. That's where you'd uncheck that. Same thing with descriptions. Typically the manufacturers will give you a 30-character description. Well, we have a lot of dealers that they want to type in their own descriptions. They don't like the descriptions that come from the manufacturer file. So if that's the case, you've got to tell the computer, don't change my description. I don't want the description to be changed. So if the manufacturer changes their description to something that's abbreviated, hey, I have my own descriptions. I don't want you to change. Obviously, this would do the same thing. Don't change the cost, don't change the retail. Normally, you want to do that. That's one of the reasons you're updating it. Now, keep in mind, if you had any pots set up as ZZ, and we went over that in Chapter 1, where ZZ pots were pots that you basically said, when I do a manufacturer update, I do not want my prices altered. So that it'll give me a report telling me the price changed, but it won't change it. It'll give me a report so I can make the decision whether I want to change them or not. And that's in the ZZ code. When you're adding pots or adding inventory, there's a field called price code. And one of those options will say ZZ, don't update it if the manufacturer makes a change. So I'm going to hit update. It wants to know my supplier, Yamaha, and now it went in and said, okay, I'm all done. Is the difference in price, obviously. There were some differences. And it gives me some reports. Now this is I just wanted to show you this because this is also the exact same screen you get if you did a manufacturer update. And if you did a manufacturer update, there are some reports that you definitely should print out, like this supersede report. This is going to tell you all the pots that were superseded. Basically what this means is from the last time I ran a manufacturer update, this is telling me that these numbers have now been superseded to this number here. You should take this report and go back in your pots department and take the pots out of this here, and there should be 13 of them there, and move them to this pot number here. An efficient pots department should be stocking their pots under the newest numbers. Now keep in mind, if you type in an old number or you look up an old number in the fiche, it will tell you that this is where you should be stocking it. So that's something that you should always keep in mind. Price change report is a report of anything that basically had a price change to it. Cost down report is anything where the cost went down, where you actually paid more for it than what they're selling it for now. So they reduced the cost of that pot. So you paid more for it a month ago or 2 months ago, then you can buy it now. The pot is going down. Obsolete are pots that manufacturer doesn't sell anymore. It's pots that you have in your inventory where there is no more valid number. In other words, you can't buy those pots. And ZZ report is any pot that were actually, you told it not to update the price, and the price has changed. So you can manually look at it and say, okay, I made the decision that I want to take care of these manually. So these are some reports you need to look at. So now that we've done that, let's go in and look at a typical record again. And I'll type in that exact same record. And there again, the system saves both lists. It basically says, okay, that new manufacturer's suggested list for that pot obviously was increased from the last time I did a manufacturer file to 1765. But my dealer list is 2025. So what this is basically saying, based on that pricing formula that I told it now when I go to sell this pot, it's going to say the list price is $20.25. That's my new list price. That's what's going to be on the invoice. So this is the dealer list price, your list price. You're the dealer. This is the manufacturer's suggested list price, 17. Now, you can go back and change that formula anytime you want. If you don't like what you did and you said, I want to go back to my list price, I don't like that, or I just want to change another formula. It's relatively simple. You can go back to vendor maintenance, type in Y for Yamaha, pick the formula you want. For example, maybe I want to go back to 1. you know, and I'm going to hit 1, hit escape. All right, I'm going to hit change. And now I'm saying, okay, I want Yamaha to be back to manufacturer. So what I'm going to do is the same thing. Click here. I want to set all my manufacturer prices back to 1. And it's basically saying, okay, I'm going to put everything back to list price, or I could have tried another formula, or maybe that formula, I didn't like it. Maybe I didn't like what it did to the pots that were low. Maybe I want to say, look, I like what it did to the high-end pots, but maybe the low-end pots, it marked it up a little bit more than I want, or a little bit less than I want. So you can critique it and change it as much as you want. And there again, it's just going to go through. It's going to reprocess everything. It doesn't take very long. You know, we have almost 250,000 pots that it just did in literally less than a minute. And it's going to do the same thing in less than a minute again. And there again, it's going to give us our report. We're going to do the same thing here. And, you know, I'd mark the same things here if I wanted to say I don't want to change that. And we've done that. And now, if we go back and we look at our price for a particular pot, the same pot, and obviously they're one of the same. It set it back to the manufacturer's list price. So you can play with that as much as you want. It's pretty easy how it works. You can understand by just playing with the numbers and going back and forth until you get the markup the way you want. Okay, well that's setting up pricing formulas. Go back to the main menu, and now we'll move on to our next chapter.